Hello, my name is Leighton Flowers. I'm the Director of Evangelism and Apologetics for Texas Baptist. I am streaming this on our Sociology 101 page because I can't think of a better topic for sociology than how to share our faith, which is what brings people to understand salvation and why salvation is so important. And so I wanted to share this across the board, even though right now I have the hat on for the Director of Evangelism. I really want this to be broadcast to as many places as we can get it, because I know many of you are pastors, church leaders, and others who are looking for good evangelism resources in ways in which you can train people to do evangelism. And so I've brought two experts in the field with me to this broadcast, and I appreciate them coming on so much. This is Alli Braun and Bucky Elliot with International Commission. Welcome to the program, guys.
Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about International Commission and what you do.
So I'm the Director of Special Projects at International Commission. I've been with the organization for 1.5 years. And in short, what we do is we partner with churches around the world and we help equip, train, and enable them to share the gospel in their communities. And everyone that we share Christ with, we then ensure is connected with the church in their community for follow-up and long-term discipleship.
Awesome. So I want to ask some questions I think that most people would like more information about how to do evangelism and all these kinds of things. Matter of fact, I've been reading through this book, Reviving Evangelism. It's a Barna book, and it's really shocking, some of the statistics that it reveals about Christians and evangelism, and that most Christians are not evangelistic at all. And so it really brings to the first question that has been raised, is why don't most Christians evangelize, and what can we do to encourage more to share their faith?
To answer that question, I'll just say that there's a myriad of reasons that people don't actually share their faith, and there's no one size fits all. But I really just want to say that ultimately it comes down to one thing, why Christians aren't evangelizing, and that is simply that they don't value the lives of the lost, or we don't value the lives of the lost. And that might sound harsh, but it's true. But we have to begin to see each person around us as someone who is uniquely created by God, for God, whom God loves and wants a relationship with. And our heart must be in a posture of intimacy and be prayerful so that our eyes can be enlightened to the people around us who are lost and dying. And we were once one of them before we came to Christ. So we really do just have to have intimacy with Christ in order for us to see the lost around us. And we have to value those lives as lost, separated from God. And so with that in mind, how do we encourage people to share their faith? I think one reason, or one way, is to simply remind your congregations weekly. If you're a pastor, a minister, a person of influence of some sort, you really do have to continue to remind the believers to share their faith, to share the good news. That's the best news that we know. And I know that I have to be constantly reminded of the gospel, even in my own life. And we have to be reminded with urgency to share this, because, like I said, there are people all around us every day that are separated from God, and we were once there, and we have to tell them the good news.
Absolutely. Well said. Go ahead, Bucky.
I was just going to say, a lot of Christians are afraid to offend someone, maybe, or afraid to be rejected, or to be underprepared to answer hard questions. But there's ways to counter all of those things and to get over them. But what Alli said is really the key to it, that we have to have a heart for people. And that's going to overcome any fear.
I think so. It's so important what you said too about the church reminding people, if it's out of sight, out of mind, but if it's right there, if you're talking about it on a regular basis, if you're giving resources on a regular basis, if you're offering training on a regular basis, you really are leaving the membership no excuse for not sharing their faith, because it's constantly in front of them. It's a constant reminder of this is not only what we're called to do. We're privileged to be able to share the good news of Jesus Christ in a variety of ways, and so that's really important. But now, one of the responses that I often get and that I hear when doing evangelism training is, well, what if I'm an introvert? What if I don't really have the gift of evangelism? How do you respond to that?
Oh, that is so good. I love that question. I first just want to share what the actual definition of evangelism is, and that is the spreading of the Christian gospel by public preaching or personal witness. So a lot of people are intimidated by the word evangelism. They automatically think that evangelism requires street preaching, knocking on doors, walking up to strangers and asking if they've heard of Jesus before. And if that makes your palms sweat, me just saying that, rest assured, that is not the only way to evangelize or share the good news of Jesus. Sure, some people are gifted in that particular way and they prefer it, and it certainly works. But there's no one perfect way of sharing the gospel. Are you better sharing one-on-one? That's the way I am, and that's perfectly fine. That's personal witness. Do you feel more comfortable sharing a text message or leveraging social media to create content, a video, something that you can really prepare to share with people who are your friends and your followers? If you have a platform of influence on social media, praise God. Like, social media is at its height right now. And that is one of the best places to share the good news right now, or even through a blog post. So yes, evangelism is for introverts. It's for people with speech impediments, who are bilingual, first timers. Evangelism is for everyone.
Well said. I think of one of the first churches I pastored when I was still in seminary, and a few of the older ladies that were part of that church who brought this concern to me, even in tears, kind of talking about how they felt guilty that they weren't doing individual personal evangelism, street preaching type of evangelism, and felt like that's what they needed to be doing in order to be real Christians, to be truly impacting in their society. I just began to point out to them the things they were doing in their hospitality, the times of gatherings that we would come together, that they were preparing the table, so to speak, for the suppers and for the gatherings that we were doing, and how that was such an integral part of the evangelism work of the church, and really helping them to see that they could write prayer notes. They can do so many things. Even back in the day when social media wasn't as prominent, even these elderly ladies were writing letters. Many people may not know what that is, where you actually have a stamp on it, but there's ways in which you can engage in evangelism and prayer ministries and prayer walks and hospitality, and using the gifts that God's given you to help spread the good news of Jesus Christ. And so that's really important. And it brings the next question up is really, are Christians or non-Christians of the lost, are they really open to listen? Maybe sometimes it feels to me that maybe the world is just kind of closed off to Christianity, doesn't want to have anything to do with it. Don't bother me with your religion. It's fine for you, but don't try to impose it upon me. What do you think about that?
If I can jump in, I'd say don't assume that anybody is unwilling to listen. Don't write anyone off before you've begun that conversation and seen how they respond to it.
Yeah.
We want to be gentle and respectful, but you don't know how someone's going to respond. Most people aren't wearing their spiritual longings on their sleeves.
Yeah.
And talking about faith is kind of a taboo in mainstream American culture, but really, at least in my experience, most people are actually willing to talk about it, but they feel awkward bringing it up. Mm-hmm. And so, we do too. That's why we're having this conversation, is so many of us feel awkward to start that conversation, even if we're serious believers. But you can be the one to help break the ice, and that's going to really go a long way.
Well said. But sometimes it seems like everybody in the United States has kind of already heard about Jesus with a Christian radio and Christian television, and it's so saturated. How do you respond to that? Is there really a need here in the United States to spread the news of Jesus Christ if everyone's already heard about it?
Mm-hmm. That is a big lie that we're all believing. It's not true. There certainly are hundreds of thousands of people in our city of DFW alone who have not heard of Jesus, or they may have heard the name, but they don't know who Jesus is. They don't know the saving grace that he's given us. And we do live in a very multicultural, multi-ethnic, religious city where people come to the United States just to work for a couple years and then head back to their country of origin. And we are their neighbors. We're the people standing beside them in the grocery line, and they may have never heard of Christ. And like Bucky said, people aren't wearing their spiritual longings on their sleeve, and we don't know how God is preparing the hearts of the people all around us. We just have to be obedient to share with them. And a lot of people may have never even met a Christian before, and you could be working beside them every day in a cubicle or on Zoom calls with them, and they don't know that you bear the name of Christ. And we have to share it with them. We really do.
Absolutely. Well, in Plano, where I live real close to Plano here, is one of the most diverse cities in the country, where a lot of immigrants are moving in, and people from all diverse nations. People are coming to us. Now, I'm not trying to discourage missions. I think we should be all about going to where people are. But in this environment, in this world, a lot of the world is coming right to us. And when we impact a family here in Plano who came from another country, we're going to be indirectly impacting their family from in that country as well. And so you can actively be involved in missions in our own backyard right here, even in the Bible Belt of Dallas, Texas. It's very much prominent around us. And so we want to encourage people not to just assume that the person living next door has access to the gospel or even knows really the claims of it, but to continue to be active in sharing our faith. Do you know examples of churches that are doing evangelism well? I think most church leaders, I've been a pastor before, a youth pastor before, the most encouraging things for me was to see other churches doing evangelism well. They were actually engaging. They were getting their people involved. They were getting all ages of the people involved, not just a few that were, really good at confrontational evangelism, but all walks of life and all ages, and getting them somehow involved in the strategy of the church to reach their community. And I've always been encouraged by seeing those stories. And I'm wondering, in your work, have you seen churches who are doing this well?
Yeah, let me name names. First Baptist in Allen, Texas. They're close by the Metroplex here, and their
Dr.
leader,
Self,
Dr. Self, he models a lifestyle of sharing the gospel one-on-one with people, and then also leading that church in strategies for evangelism in their local community. Some of it's cross-cultural. Some of it is, right next door. And that just helps set the tone. When pastors lead by example, that is so vital in creating a culture of evangelism, not just an initiative or something we do, once a year, once a month or whatever, and not just an outreach, but a lifestyle of and a culture of sharing the gospel. They do create a lot of intentional opportunities for their members to do this, to go out into the community to share Jesus. Sometimes that does mean knocking on doors for them, for the people who are comfortable doing that, but they're very strategic about it in the follow-up and building relationships. They invite people into their building to build friendships with Jesus through ESL classes and things like that. And they offer, I think this is really important, they offer regular evangelism training for their members, how to share the gospel one-on-one with people in a cafe or at your home, online or whatever, in daily life. A lot of them like to use a tool called 3 Circles.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone familiar with that kind of understands the gist of it. It's very modifiable, and they use one that is tailored particularly to some of the worldviews of the people that live around them. And I think they're a really great example of how to do that.
And there are some great tools for sharing your faith. I've always used One Verse Evangelism. 3 Circles is another one that's newer to me, but I've seen it used really effectively. James Langford, who is now a senator in Oklahoma, used to work here in Texas Baptist as a part of our evangelism team. And one of the things he said quite regularly that I've stolen and used whenever I'm doing evangelism training, he's asked the question, which evangelism tool is the best? Is it 3 Circles? Is it One Verse Evangelism? Is it the newest app, from this group or that group? Which is the best evangelism tool out there? And his response is the one you use.
Yeah.
And that's really a great answer, is that whatever you feel comfortable with, whether it's just sharing your own story, whether it's a tool or a track or any of those kinds of tools, it's just important that you do it, that you take the time to share your faith. That's so vital and so important. Now, Excuse me. One last question I wanted to ask with regard to strategies of the churches. You mentioned First Baptist Allen. Is the strategy that works best the kind of the come and see model or the go and tell model?
That's a great question. If our mindset is predominantly come and see, we can kind of use that as a cop-out to the responsibility we have of sharing our faith. And just remember that the church is the body of Christ. So we can't always think of it as the one and only place that we bring people to hear the gospel. And a lot of people have reservations or preconceived notions about church where it's really a turnoff to them. And in that case, it has to be a go and tell. So the answer to that question, I would say, is both. We can say come and see based on various reasons, but also we do need to go and tell. We need to be relational and tell. We have to do both.
Very well said. I totally agree. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And sometimes people throw one out for the other and say, well, come and see just doesn't work. You can't, the invitational stuff doesn't work. It works for some people. Event evangelism does work still. Going door to door still works. Using tracts and sitting down with people in coffee shops, that still works. Like we said, whatever tool you're willing to use, that's the best tool, because God can use whatever willingness you have to share the gospel with someone. And God can take even our sometimes less than perfect efforts, and he can use them for his kingdom and for his work. And it's amazing hearing some of the stories that God can do through the lives of even weak vessels who sometimes feel very inadequate in sharing their faith, that God can still use us wherever we are. I think that we see stories of that throughout the scriptures, of Aaron and others who weren't good communicators. Or Moses wasn't a good communicator, but then God supplied, and Aaron in his life, and others that God supports and helps through their weaknesses and makes them strong even in their weakness. Tell us in closing here, how can churches and church leaders get more information from you, more resources from you? I know I've put a link in the show notes that will help, but tell us more about the resources you have available as we close.
Yeah, so if you follow that link in the show notes, or you can go to our website and find Storytelling with Purpose Evangelism Toolkit. And it is a bundle of resources that help you learn how to pray for people intentionally for evangelism, how to craft your personal testimony in a way that you can share it easily, and then several practical tools for sharing the gospel, beginning conversations, praying with people in ways that are not intimidating. And like I said, ways that you can help break the ice and have those conversations and see how the Lord is leading.
Well, thank you to both so much for coming on today and talking through these things. And let me just encourage those who are watching that if you are a part of a church, an organization, that you can have influence in leadership, either as a pastor, a youth pastor, a minister, a layman, whatever it may be, that you have an area of influence in your church. If your church is not active in sharing the faith and doing events that are specifically for reaching the community and reaching the lost, then I encourage you to go to this website. You can also go to texasbaptist.org/evangelism to find other resources that are available for you. This is an urgent call and commission of the scriptures for us to be able to have the opportunity to share the love of Jesus Christ with our neighbors next door. And we believe that everyone needs to hear the gospel because Christ died for everyone. And we want everyone to know what Christ has provided for them. And so that's what drives us, is the love that God has for the world, and the love that we can actually pray for it. We can say, God, sometimes I feel indifferent towards the world. Sometimes when I watch the news, I get angry at lost people, and just give me a compassion for the lost. Help me to see them as sheep without a shepherd, like you see the lost, and help me to have the compassion for them. And so I want to thank Alli and Bucky for your work. Thank you for giving in the way that you do and providing in the way that you do. The church needs missionaries like yourself that are training and equipping the church to share the gospel. So thank you for what you do. I really do appreciate that. And God bless you guys for watching. Please continue to tune in and watch for more resources. We continue to try to bring more resources to you through evangelism at Texas Baptist, also through internationalcommission.org. Make sure you check out their website to find more information about how you can equip your church to do evangelism better. God bless.